create a slider with a shadow. A slider is usually the main gallery component of a website that occupies the top central area. It's also known as the hero area since it's usually the most important, but it can also be called the main banner or slideshow area. The purpose of the slider is to create a high-impact and long-lasting impression. Usually it contains some call to action, for example, a certain discount on a product. So let's create one. Get the round rectangle tool and draw a shape as wide as the website. How wide, you ask? Open up the guides with Control, semicolon, and you'll have the answer. Now let's add a light gray stroke to it and maybe a gradient of some sort that will make your text stand out. Once we have that set, let's press T and write our headline. The text should be fairly big and it should say something like Amazing Headline Text. Or we can adjust the font from the character panel, and I generally recommend a bold font. Now let's add a drop shadow, but make sure you use a color that's a bit darker than the background. Black is usually too powerful. After you're happy with that, we'll create a second line of text which will have 2 to 3 lines of the offer description. We'll use Lipsum.com to get some filler text. Lorem ipsum is widely used in the web design business, and it's just Latin text. Better to use that than just pressing randomly on your keyboard. The font size should be smaller than the headline, but still decently big, somewhere in the area of 16 to 20 pixels. So we have our text component and a decent background, and now let's add a nice icon. For that, we'll go to iconfinder.com and select an icon that's big enough to use. I'll adjust the filter in order to get only big icons. Once you're happy with one, download it, drag it into place, and we're set. Since this is a slider, it will, slide. So that means there will be multiple images. For that, we'll need some controlling elements so you can go back and forth. First, we'll add some arrows to the sides. Instead of using simple icons, I will drag a black rectangle, and then from the custom shape, I will select an arrow, which I will set to white. Adjust the size if needed with Ctrl-T, put it into place, and make sure the arrow is centered inside the rectangle. Now group, duplicate, Ctrl-T, flip horizontally. Now we're getting somewhere. Usually slides don't load instantly, so let's have an icon that represents that. Go to iconfinder.com and search for loading. This icon is great, but we want it in white since it will have better visibility. Go to the FX panel, go to Color Overlay, and instead of the default red, use white. Use Ctrl-T to resize if needed. So we're almost done with our lovely slider, so let's add some final elements to it. Draw a black rectangle at the bottom of it. Now select the round rectangle tool, set the radius to 5 pixels, and draw this shape. Then select the ellipse tool and make a few circles. They should all be white, except one, which should be blue to represent that that's the active one. And now we should clean our layers up, rename, group, hide layers if needed. As an extra topping, let's make a lovely shadow for it. We'll make a rectangle. Use the Gaussian blur effect and lower the opacity and move the layer underneath our slider. Then, to give it a twist, hit Ctrl-T and select Perspective. Now drag while holding Shift, and you'll see this gives the slider a very 3D aspect. And now we're done. Of course, there are many types of sliders, and you can experiment with lots of shadows and graphics, perspectives, and so forth, but make sure to make some of your own.